Okay, so good morning. It's Caroline and Abby here, and we're the Better Brain Company. And we get lots of questions from potential clients about what it's like to work with us. So we thought it would be a really nice idea just to sit down and have a quick Q&A between the two of us and share it with other people to see if it can help answer some questions. So just to point out that I'm not a therapist. My expertise is sort of strategy and operations behind the scenes. Abby is our lead therapist. So we're talking, I'm asking questions almost like from the point of view of our clients having sort of no prior experience other than being a client of Abby's a few years ago, but not having sort of the scientific and clinical understanding that Abby does. So hopefully it gives people a bit of an insight into how it all works. So the first question I've got for you, Abby, is the work that you do is mainly around solution focused therapy. That's quite different to like traditional talking therapy. Can you just explain a little bit about exactly what solution focused therapy is for us?
Yeah, sure. So it's probably easier to start in a way by explaining what it's not, because I think so often people have very fixed ideas around therapy and how therapy will work. Um, it's all about sort of moving in a future focused direction rather than what we might think of in conventional therapy as exploring problems and digging around problems and analysing problems. So what we understand from quite a lot of research that's been done over the past few years is that when we talk more about our problems and dig deeper into them and try and analyze them more, um, it can sometimes help kind of spark ideas and spark solutions and ways forward. But quite often it can also tend to reaffirm them, and it can get our brain almost stuck in a loop of embedding those neural circuits more and more and making us perceive the problem as a bigger thing than it is, or as a bigger thing than it has need to be. So what solution focused therapy does is, rather than analysing the problems and trying to look at them from every angle and kind of drag solutions out that way, it's more about, okay, if we were in a better place already, let's just imagine that we were in a better place already, what might that look like, and what would we notice in the world that was a bit different if we looked at things from that perspective? And what that does, it helps our brain start to go, oh, okay, all of a sudden I can take my focus off the fact that this thing's not going quite right in my life, and I can start to say, well, what might things look like if it were a little bit easier, if I had that bit more confidence, if I were feeling that bit more calm, that bit more relaxed, that bit more able to cope with things. And from that kind of perspective, we can draw in our resources, our own kind of skills and coping strategies. And our brain will start to go, oh, there might be times in the past where I've actually experienced this, and what did that look like? And it can start to kind of weave together this picture of strategies and tools that can help us cope, and just see things from a different perspective that we wouldn't have access to otherwise. So it almost sort of takes us out of our experience that can be quite blinkered almost. And we can feel really very stuck in that, and it can just give us a chance to step outside of that for a few moments and start to see things in a different way and say, well, oh, actually, when I'm not looking at it from that perspective, there are alternatives, there are different ways forward. And that sounds like quite complicated if you're in a problem. It's very hard to do that for yourself. Sometimes we almost need somebody else putting us on the spot and asking a question in a very, very gentle, supportive way, but sort of asking the questions that we don't ask ourselves, and saying, like, what might that look like, and just encouraging us to come up with a different view on things so that we can actually start to see it that different way. Hopefully that makes some sense.
It does. I thought when we worked together, when I was your client, it was really good to have you with the objectivity because it's so difficult when you're in the middle of like a storm to just be bogged down in how bad everything is and to look at things in a different way with you sort of gently nudging and guiding me along was really, really helpful. Um, so I think a lot of people understand therapy as being something um, where they have to talk about their past a
Mm.
lot, delving right back into childhood,
Yeah.
possibly things that may have happened, traumatic events, things like that, and really sort of go deep into analysing like their whole life in order to be able to move forward. And you don't have to do an awful lot of that with the solution focused therapy, do you?
No, no, not at all. People often like to share some of that stuff because it helps them kind of ground themselves in their experience and understand what it is that they want to tackle. But it's very much about, okay, let's acknowledge that. Completely respect where we've been and what's happened in the past and those problems. But then how can we start to build forward motion so that we're just moving productively away from those problems and building a framework for getting to a point where we're able to look back and say, well, that once was a problem, but it no longer affects me in the way that it used to. So to do that, we don't, as strange as it sounds, we don't have to kind of dig into the problem in itself to find that way forward and to be able to use our own skills, resources, um, experiences to be able to see things in a different way. And I've been very pleasantly surprised. I shouldn't say surprised because I've been doing this for so many years now, but frequently I'm kind of working with somebody thinking, wow, that thing that used to bother them is just it's not an issue for them anymore. And they're kind of looking at me and saying, I can't even remember what I was so worried about or what I was so afraid about, because that thing's just not hanging over me in the way it always has done. And our brain's natural inclination is to want to just kind of mull over things and keep assessing them and keep kind of pulling them apart. And we're kind of determined that we'll get to the root of this thing and we'll find the nub of what it is and that'll fix it and make us all better. But sometimes actually just removing that focus and not denying it. We don't ever want to kind of deny our experience and say, well, that never happened, or I'll just push my trauma in a closet and forget about it because that's not going to be helpful or healthy. But by um, focusing in the future and focusing on solutions and different ways of processing things, it does help us to unravel some of that stuff in the past. Even while we're looking over here, we're actually processing what's gone on in the past, and our brain's starting to make sense of it in a different way. And it's saying, okay, I can now see that thing from a slightly different perspective, and it doesn't need to have that hold over me anymore. So quite often we'll do a session and people will go away and then they'll come to me the next week or in a couple of weeks' time and they'll say, oh, do you know, like between sessions I wasn't doing any active work, but all of a sudden I just had this like realization about this thing that had happened once upon a time or about me as a person. And that's what our brain is capable of doing. It's when we stop focusing on things and actually just give it some time to look elsewhere and to calm down and relax. It actually is great at coming up with its own insights and helping us understand the world in a healthier, happier way, and yeah, getting to where we want to be.
That's definitely been my experience as well. There were lots of times where between sessions where I've gone, oh, that's quite interesting.
Yeah. Ooh. All of a sudden it's like the filter's shifted and I can just see things.
Definitely. Yeah, yeah. So it's the solution focused therapy is really good for people who don't want to spend
Yeah.
months and months going over sort of agonizing details and talking, because there are quite a lot of people out there that find it difficult to talk. It's a well-coined phrase, just talk, open up, but it's impossible sometimes for people to do so. So it's really, I think, something that sets what we do apart from the more traditional talking based therapies is you don't have to go over and over and over things. You can, like you say, sort of focus on the future and move forward, but sort of process the stuff that's happened in the past sort of subconsciously
Yeah.
alongside it. Yeah. So how does solution focused therapy actually work for like the really big issues like anxiety, depression, and trauma?
hmm Um, much the same way, I guess. So I work with solution-focused hypnotherapy, and a big part of that, as well as doing the discussion-based bit, the sort of gentle, supportive, future-focused discussions, a lot of it's also about relaxing and helping the brain to get to a state of being really relaxed. So often when we're stuck in anxiety, depression, trauma, what's happening is our fight flight system, the amygdala and all its little associated bits and bobs, it's an overdrive. It's kind of constantly got us switched into this place where we're hyper aware of everything that's going on around us. We're hyper vigilant to problems and threats and stresses, and we see them as much bigger and much more threatening than they warrant really sometimes, or that they can start to feel really quite overwhelming. Um, and that part of our brain with the amygdala, the vital flight bit, tends to have us coming back to things over and over and over again. So people will often recognize when they're in anxiety or depression, or if they've got trauma, they'll keep going back to things. It'll keep popping up in their experience. They'll keep having the same thoughts over and over. They'll do what we call ruminating, which is where these things are going round and round in our minds, and we just can't kind of break out of that loop of thinking. And our brain tends to be very negative also when we're in that part, more so, or when that has more influence over our thoughts and feelings and emotions. So a lot of the work that we do in solution focused hypnotherapy is about calming down that part of the brain, and just like teaching ourselves to relax and our nervous system to relax and get to this place where there isn't so much influence coming from that very emotional part of our brain, and it's able to kind of just calm down and relax and allow our intellectual rational mind to have a bit more say and to start kind of feeding back to it that actually things are okay and it's all right to do things a different way, or we don't need to focus on those worries quite so much. So yeah, a lot of it really is about getting the nervous system to a place where we're then able to just kind of let things be. And through doing that, we're then able to use that intellectual part of our mind, that lovely, creative, positive, motivated, confident part of our brain, to say, okay, well, when this emotional bit's not shouting quite so loudly, what does the real me think about this, and what would the real me be able to do differently in this situation to handle it? And that can kind of break that deadlock of anxiety and depression, by helping us like all of a sudden start to see things in a different way. So again, it's like, yeah, calming down that part of our brain just facilitates the whole um, processing of all that stuff that's been stuck in there and going around in circles for ages, and all of a sudden it starts to free the flow, and we have just access to different ways of looking at things again. So I mean, it's not an overnight fix. We're not going to say we'll magically wave a wand and all of a sudden you wake up one morning and anxiety's gone and you're kind of skipping through the cornfields or anything like that. It's a gradual process of getting to a better place and gradually noticing where things are going a little bit better, and just like breaking the hold of that overactive part of our brain, really, so that we can do that and get to a happier place. Yeah.
I know that when I first got to know you, thinking about potentially working with you as a therapy client, I think my main sort of concern was around the hypnotherapy part, because you see sort of staged hypnotherapists, you're going to follow my finger, and then when I clap my hands, you'll act like a chicken or whatever. And so it's really quite distinct from the showman kind of hypnotherapy, isn't it? Um, is it actually evidence-based solution-focused hypnotherapy? Is it recognized by professional bodies?
Yeah, so increasingly so, in terms of evidence base, it's always been grounded in neuroscience and psychology. So the founder, David Newton, created the solution focused hypnotherapy model based upon good sound science. That was always very important, that it was all like techniques were being used that actually made sense, and we had some grounding in science, and we knew that that there was potential for them to make a good positive difference in people's lives. What's not always been the case is that we've had kind of really strong evidence to say, well, somebody's gone through the process of solution focused hypnotherapy and they've gone from X to Y, and we can very kind of clearly track that particular change has taken place. So lots of research funding in mental health has gone to, I think, existing therapies, and there's lots of research funding that goes into kind of drugs and so on. Obviously, that's always a really well-funded industry, but there's not been kind of massive funding for things like solution focused hypnotherapy. So there haven't been kind of large scale studies that have said by going through that process of solution focused hypnotherapy, you'll let's say you'll overcome a skin condition that you've got, or you'll actually IBS is something that has been done for hypnotherapy. I don't think it's solution focused hypnotherapy specifically, but gut directed hypnotherapy has got very clear evidence that does work and make a difference. But recently there have been some more kind of patient outcomes measured trials going on, which is fab, whereby people are going into the trial saying, well, what's important to you as you're going into this therapy? What are the outcomes that you're looking for and hoping for here? And then measuring and tracking those
Mm.
over the course of therapy. And actually there's been some really good positive correlation with having the therapy and finding that it's making a big difference in people's lives. So I think like there's an ongoing trial at the moment that's showing it's like 87% effective or something along those lines, like really getting quite nice positive measures. And over time, hopefully we'll have larger scale things going on where we're able to see that it's making a beneficial difference for more and more lives. But yeah, it's definitely really well grounded in scientific understanding of the brain and how our brain works, and how we get the best out of ourselves as people. There's lots and lots of evidence out there to show that solution focused therapy, solution focused brief therapy works, to show that hypnosis is really powerful and has had a huge impact in things like pain management and improved clinical outcomes in people with serious illness and these sorts of things. So there's lots of kind of supportive evidence around the subject. It's just getting those very specific things,
Yeah.
which is really exciting to see that starting to happen. And yes, it is professionally endorsed. There are bodies for hypnotherapy. The Association for Solution Focused Hypnotherapy is the kind of the main one around that area. There's the National Council for Hypnotherapy. We're registered with them as well. Complementary and National Health Council, which are the main kind of NHS recognised body, also really support it as well. And hopefully it will be increasingly recognised as more and more evidence emerges that actually, yeah, this is a really powerful, effective thing.
Yeah, I think we're not trying to sort of talk the traditional talking therapy down, not at all, but it's just I think our sort of aim is to further, you know, the cause of solution focused therapy, you know, talk about it more, offer it as an alternative for people who haven't had success with the traditional talking therapy route. So it's great that there's more and more evidence coming to the fore that it works and delivers real change. Um, so is solution focused therapy, is it a form of positive thinking? And is it all to do with woo, or is it much deeper than that?
Much deeper than that, thankfully. Positive thinking is wonderful. Our brains are not very good at it by themselves. It's probably the easiest way to summarize it. I quite often say to clients, because when we first start working together, we'll go through a lot of talking about the brain and how the brain works and the different things that we can do to help ourselves calm down that fight or flight system that we talked about earlier, and get more control from our rational intellectual brain and help that really come back into the game. And one of those things is positive thinking. But I always say to my clients, it's not that we're sticking on rose tinted spectacles and pretending everything's okay, because I think there's been quite a lot of that in the personal development world and the kind of success space over the last few years, and maybe even going back, I don't know, 30, 40 years or so. It's quite a lot of motivational talk and yeah, just think positive, it's all fine. And actually for some people that can be quite counterproductive because they're kind of sitting there then thinking, well, I should be feeling positive about this thing.
Like,
I should be able to see the world in an easier way. Why can I not just feel grateful for the fact that I've got this job, or feel grateful for my house and where I live, or happy with my family? And they're kind of sitting there thinking, well, I should be thinking that way, but I'm not capable of that. And it could actually feed us this kind of whole load of failure and discomfort around who we are and how we're coping in life. So yeah, it's very much not just about positive thinking and what we might call toxic positivity. It's more about, okay, what can we genuinely find for you at the moment that you're able to focus on that feels good, or that sometimes it's even just giving ourselves credit for the fact that we're coping. We've got through a day. um, or being able to reflect on ourselves in a way that's not just like constantly self-critical, and finding those little areas where we can be a bit more kind to ourselves, even just treating ourselves a bit better. So it's very much about kind of tiny little steps and just helping somebody ease into being able to see themselves and the world in a bit more of a positive way. And as we said, our brains are not great at that. So a lot of it is actually just kind of releasing that stranglehold of the emotional brain that just wants us to see everything negatively, and
mm,
help kind of calm that down so it can start to say, well, actually, maybe things don't need to be quite so bad. Maybe they can just be a little tiny, like 10% better today. And I can start to see a couple of things that, as a result of feeling 10% better, I'm able to see are like better in my experience. And it's just like gradually building that ability within ourselves to find an alternative perspective. So yeah, solution focused is a great phrase because it is very much about building our own solutions, but it's not like we've got to be Superman all of a sudden and seeing everything really positively and really wonderfully. It's more about like how can we gradually get there to a place where it's easy to be seeing things from that positive perspective, instead of feeling like we've got to work hard at it and it's got to be this struggle to get to positivity.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's really important, I think, to stress that it's all based around the individual, isn't it? We've agonized for quite some time on how to fit like therapy that's so individual. People have such individual needs. Things are so nuanced. It's really hard when we've talked about the research comparing outcomes because everyone's starting from completely different points as well. But we've also really struggled with the fact that, you know, when you're trying to grow a business and people are telling you to market in a certain way and to build programs that people can have off the shelf, so almost cookie cutter type programs where everyone goes through the same process, that just doesn't fit with therapy. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And for some people, even doing that first session of sitting down and just understanding where their thoughts and feelings and behaviors that they're not enjoying, where they've been coming from, and how it is that their brain's been keeping them locked in these cycles that they're not enjoying as an experience in life. Um, Sometimes even doing that session can be enough that it sets off this massive chain reaction, and they're like, you see them 6 months later, and all of a sudden they're like, that thing we did together, it was only one session, but it was amazing. And I've had clients come back to me before now who have just made huge changes in their lives over that period of time. Um, and obviously we can keep on working and working, getting to a better place still, but it can really spark this massive period of change for them. Whereas other people, it very much can be like 12 sessions, 20 sessions, more than that. They might just need that slower process to help them gradually work through things and process everything that's been keeping them stuck where they are. And yeah, to try and put that into a program and try and kind of define it and say, well, everybody's going to be the same. That we're not the same. We're all different humans. We've got different experiences. We've got different perspectives on the world in the first place. We process things in different ways. Sometimes just the very nature of our circumstances means that it's a lot harder for us to move forward than it is for somebody else who's
yeah,
maybe less tied or trapped in certain circumstances in their lives. And um, very often what people initially come to therapy for is not what they think it is. That sounds deeply dark and mysterious, but quite often it will be one thing that
Mm.
somebody will initially present with and that they want to get fixed. Like me, for example, with my singing and stage fright. And
Mhm.
what I went to hypnotherapy for was to get over my stage fright so that I could sing more comfortably in front of other people. And it was the tip of this massive iceberg. And actually, there was a whole load of anxiety and confidence stuff and like childhood trauma and all sorts of stuff that I'd never really acknowledged before. And it was only through that process that I was able to start to acknowledge it and say to myself, well, actually, maybe I have been working a lot harder than I need to. Maybe I have been kind of keeping myself trapped in these cycles of stress and overwhelm. Um, and I made some really, really big changes in my life as a result of that session, which kind of far outweighed the stage fright stuff in the end. But yeah, it's quite amazing where you can end up on that journey. So that's why we're so keen to kind of keep individualized therapy going alongside things like more coaching based programs. So we do have more structured programs for people who want to focus on just very specific things like leadership
Yeah.
and getting to their full potential in their career. And it's in some ways easier to kind of package and put those things in a little box and say, well, we'll work specifically on these areas over a period of time to get there. But even so, within that process, you're still kind of very much working with that individual and all of their little blocks. It's just a slightly different way of going about it. But yeah, we are all humans. We're all very, very much individuals and need individual care and attention to get to where we want to be.
Wonderful. Oh, well, thanks for taking the time today, Abby. It was
No,
really good to have a proper chat about the ins and outs of how it all works.
thank you. I hope it's been helpful and I hope it all made sense. Thank you.